Zafir Publishing presents The Secrets of Primrose Square, written by Claudia Carroll and read by Aoife Mcmahon. A woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until you put her in hot water. Attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt. Winter. Susan. 48 The Crescent. Susan didn't used to be like this. To look at her now, soaked through to the skin on a dark, wintry night, as she stood on the street outside an 18-year-old boy's home, just staring up at his bedroom window, you'd think she was some kind of deranged stalker. It's 8 minutes past 8, she thought, glancing down at her watch. I'll stay here as long as I can, no matter how bad the rain gets. From bitter experience over the past few months, she knew that an hour was about as long as she could hold out safely for before someone came out of the house to accost her. To tell her to cop herself on, that she'd a pre-teen daughter at home who needed her. Haven't you better things to be doing with yourself, Susan? We know you're hurting, but hurting us isn't really going to change anything now, is it? Worst case scenario, someone from inside the house would call the guards, again, and report her, yet again. Then, if they weren't too busy, a squad car would generally arrive between 34 and 42 minutes later, with flashing lights and full sirens blaring, if they really wanted to intimidate her. 2 cops would get out, it was always 2. One usually a woman who'd do a bad cop routine with Susan, at least until they heard her side of the story. Then, after a good talking to, and maybe even the vague threat that she was running the risk of getting herself sectioned if she kept up this carry-on, they'd take her back home to Primrose Square. There, they'd usually make her a strong cup of tea and give her the same "you want to watch yourself" speech Susan had already sat through dozens of times. Generally, that's what would happen. As soon as they realized she wasn't an arsonist or a stalker or a deranged middle-aged woman in love with a minor. Just an ordinary woman, dealing with the unimaginable, the only way she knew how. Time would pass, days, even weeks. Then, sooner or later, the cops would try to wash their hands of the whole sorry mess, yet again, with the threat of a restraining order or a visit from a social worker, just to check how you are, and a stern caution to try to be more careful in future, Susan. We know this can't be easy for you, but this kind of behaviour isn't doing you any favours. Next time you could end up in real trouble. Worth it, Susan thought, as a bus splashed past her, momentarily blocking out her view of the house she was fixated on. Well worth it. What real harm was she doing anyway? All she was doing was standing on a public pavement, minding her own business. Nothing more. Nothing she wasn't perfectly entitled to do. Besides, in this city, the cops should be out trying to catch warring drug barons, not hassling innocent women who weren't bothering anyone. At least, no one who hadn't bloody well asked for it in the first place. I can't forget, she thought. Never, as long as I draw breath, will I ever be able to forget. So why should he? Why should this fucker get to sleep soundly in his bed at night after what he's done? Tonight, I'll give it exactly another 57 minutes and 45 seconds. She decided, squinting down at her watch through the icy cold darkness. Then, providing they didn't throw her into a prison cell overnight as a cautionary warning, she'd come back again tomorrow, at precisely the same time, and do it all over again. Melissa. 18 Primrose Square. At exactly 8:08 p.m., Melissa Hayes was at home in the kitchen extension that once used to be her mother's pride and joy, heating up a beef stew that no one would touch and taking care to leave the place spotless behind her, which no one would thank her for. 12 years of age and desperately trying to keep up some semblance of normality. Her dad had at least called her from abroad, she thought, picking at a tiny bit of stew. It had tasted so delicious when she'd made it earlier in Miss Hogan's home economics class, but it was all dry and salty now, probably because she'd left it in the oven too long. They'd only talked for a few minutes, but still.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?